Before we start, I'd like to give everyone and you a quick introduction, 2 minutes, of what we stand
Sure.
at Strong Towns, so we have a better mutual understanding. There are 4 or 5 major principles, priorities that we advocate for. The first one is incremental housing. We are not advocating for changing the character of communities, building high rises everywhere and making people upset. If we let all over Richmond Hill just one level up of what you have already there, and at a very, as of right, quick 2-day permit, you can start building, that's going to make huge difference in housing stock. The second one is we oppose highway expansion. We don't think building a tunnel under 401 is going to make any improvement in the traffic of the city. Transportation safety is another issue. We think that streets and roads don't belong only to drivers. People who walk, people who bike and use other modes of transportation, they also own those streets and are entitled to be safe. They shouldn't risking their lives each time they go on the road. And improving public transit is another area that we advocate for. So we need to have better transit, and that doesn't mean more buses. We need to have better routes as well. And finally is the financial transparency of the municipal government. Municipal government can't be always in perpetual deficit and looking for handouts from the governments up down levels. So if we design our system, design our tax, property tax system in a way that everyone pays for what they are really getting out of the city, I don't think we should be falling short of our budget. So this is the gist of what we stand for and what we are going to advocate in the future, and I thank you very much. So if you want to start the meeting.
Well, thank you very much. And you know, as I said, I was aware of the foundations of what you're advocating for, and I appreciate that. And I mean, that's one of the reasons that I reached out, was because I think that everything you've just said, well, with maybe one small exception, which I'll talk about in a minute, I agree with, and I think that these are some of the difficult decisions that we're going to be having to make as cities and as communities to be able to move into this next phase of where we're at, and frankly to get through this crisis that we're in with housing. So as I said, I agree with everything. I mean, and a lot of what you're talking about is things that we are working on, and we are. It's built into our new official plan. It is built into the policies and processes that you know, the city is working on, and I'm certainly in support of, and have brought forward some of those exact same concepts as well. The one thing, though, that I think, and I don't disagree with you, but I think there's a subtlety here that I think is important about the finances. The thing that causes me a great deal of concern and frankly sleepless nights actually is the financial situation of cities. The model of funding cities was built 100 and something years ago, and things were very different 100 and something years ago than they are today. One of the things at that time is, you know, our principal form of revenue generation is property taxes. I mean, there are a couple of others, but that is by far the biggest one. And property taxes, in and of itself, in my opinion, are a very unfair tax, as taxes go, right? Because a property tax doesn't really reflect your ability to pay that tax. If, for example, you lost your job this year, your property tax bill would still be the same. If you lost your job, your income tax bill, both at the provincial and federal level, would probably be zero. Right? So it reflects that income tax is a very progressive tax. The property tax is a very regressive tax. Now, it is what we have, so that's the tool that we have in our toolbox. The problem starts to happen, though, when the model was built and all of the few really things that property tax had to pay for, it wasn't that big a deal. But the problem is that over time, a lot of things have been downloaded, offloaded, and put on to cities and towns that really are not what the property tax base and the model was designed to pay for. And I'll give you an example. We just got a report recently at the Region of York where we're hundreds of millions of dollars paying for things that really are health and public health related items that really should be paid for by the provincial and federal government. So I spend a lot of time advocating for Richmond Hill to be getting more funding from the provincial and federal government. And it's not, in my mind, funding for things that is frivolous or things that we don't need. It's really more about getting a fair distribution of the tax and, frankly, the revenue tools. I don't want to be putting new taxes on anybody, and I mean that's not in the plan. But I think that cities could do better if as the Association of Municipalities of Ontario has been advocating for, we get a new fiscal framework, and we call it a social and economic prosperity review. So I know that's a long answer to a short question, but that's where I would stand with the property or with the taxation part. But in terms of developing cities, I mean, there are a number of different ways that we're going to be solving the housing crisis, right? And in Richmond Hill, we are certainly going to be putting what we call gentle density, which is using the land in our neighborhoods effectively, so that we allow basement apartments, we allow for as of right zoning permissions, which we've now finalized and are working to get that done. And there's other things that we can do, and it won't interrupt or disrupt the neighborhood, but it will allow opportunities for housing that don't exist right now. And that's really the most important thing. But the second thing in a city like Richmond Hill, where we do have very significant transit investments already with the bus rapid transit running up Yonge Street and with the eventual subway extension to Highway 7 in Yonge, and possibly even further north than that, is an opportunity to build a higher density housing corridor in there, where we can also with that build a walkable community, build a community that has all of the amenities, the businesses, the shops, the services, all that are there within a short walk. Right? And not only a short walk for the people that live in that actual corridor area, but also a short walk for the people that live on the east and west side of that corridor, which in Richmond Hill's case is the vast majority of our population. Now, having said that, there are areas designated in our official plan for higher density developments. In fact, there are areas in our official plan that are designated for very high density developments. But there are also areas that are designated for virtually no extra development because, for example, in the north part of the city, they're on the Oak Ridges Moraine. So there are areas there that are
You're talking about new developments.
Yeah, new development. Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be some, and I mean, Oak Ridges, the entire town part of Oak Ridges is on the Oak Ridges Moraine, but not. I mean, a lot of it is urban settlement designated, but there's thousands of acres in there that's off limits to development, and in order for us to be able to continue to have that off limits to development, we are going to have to take advantage of the areas that are available for development.
The raging question that I've always had before opening to the floor to ask their questions, it's great that on the Yonge corridor we have the rapid transit and you have this high density zoning and everything. It's fantastic, and especially for the workplaces. But Richmond Hill is not just that corridor, yeah?
Right. That's right.
When are you going to make those changes to other parts of the Richmond Hills so that they can at least add one level, not a high rise that people get riled up and come to the council and when that's going to happen?
And well, it's happening. It's already happening. So the
So can I go to the city and in 24, 48 hours get my approval to add an extra level onto?
Well, chances are you're not going to get an approval in 48 hours for almost anything that you do, even if what you're applying for is exactly what it is, because the approval process is a fairly complicated process, and it's not just the zoning and the official plan designation that you have to comply with, but it's also like the Ontario Building Code. And the Ontario Building Code is not our code. It's from the province of Ontario. We administer it. But that Ontario Building Code is there to protect people from houses being built in a way that are not safe. Right, so as much as it is sometimes an inconvenience, the spirit and purpose of the Ontario Building Code is so that we have structures that don't catch on fire, don't fall down in inclement weather, and goodness knows we have a lot more in the way of climate change coming down the pike. So that is an important part of it. So, but having said that, I mean the 48-hour thing. I do agree with you, and we've made significant changes that we need to speed up the application process. So when somebody brings in an application that is consistent with what is allowed in that area, the amount of time that it would take for that to be approved is going to be significantly less today than it would have been a few years ago, because we've actually had support from the provincial government to help to do an audit of our approvals process, and it is streamlined. As for the things like for as of right zoning, you are able to do for as of right zoning now.
Everywhere.
Yeah, and by the way, for the last number of years, we've had 3 as of right zoning, which means that you could take your house, do a basement apartment, do a granny flat, additional housing unit, they're called granny flats, in the back, and then have your house. So there, you can have that now, and in fairness, there hasn't been a lot of uptake on that. Now, every year we add a few more, and I expect the 4 as of right, the additional of 1, from 3 to 4, will happen in the same way. Like, it will happen in time. It won't happen necessarily all at one time. But those housing units that would be produced in a situation like that are important, because they don't exist right now, for the most part, in any city, at least around here, and they do provide an opportunity for somebody to be able to have a housing unit where a roof over.
Yeah, they're going to be more affordable than something that a corporation.
Exactly. But at the same time, there's also a demand for housing that's not that, but it's, say, in a purpose-built rental building, right? Mm-hmm. And part of the housing crisis is certainly affordability, and that's the bottom line. But part of the disadvantage that we have, that we're working on in Richmond Hill, is that we don't have the variety, right? Like, we have single, in the past, we've had single detached homes, townhouses and a few semis, but it's all ground related. That's all we have. What we need is to increase some variety in those houses, in those housing units, but also increase the number of units that we would have on corridors, as I said, like Yonge Street and a few other places as well.
Okay, let's move from housing to other issues and open to the floor. Anyone has any questions? Yeah, Ara?
So you may have seen me come to council, and I'm like, okay, I support the height and I support the density. It's not really that I really support the height and density. It's that, I realize we're kind of backed in a corner here, because I'm coming to an age where I might have to get somewhere of my own to stay soon, and I can't afford the things that are on the market right now, right? And I also see those applications coming for the Oak Ridges Moraine, and I'm an environmentalist. I don't want that to happen, but I'm realizing the only reason that's happening, that developer came to increase their height, the only reason that's happening is because there's a market for it. And I know that specific one, they're like, okay, we want to justify or whatever, but they think they can make money, and that's why they're doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because there's a shortage of housing, and there's a shortage of housing, I think, because of zoning restrictions.
Well, so if I may, so I think, first of all, I understand this. And you and I have talked about this before, but I understand the need for young people to have housing as well as you could possibly imagine. I have a son your age, and I'm worried about exactly the same thing. And I would argue that as a parent, I'm probably worried about it almost as much as the young person who is my son is worried about it. So. But you know what, I have to be honest with you, that's a very important segment of the population that really needs housing right now, and really needs a fair shot at getting housing that they can afford, absolutely. But there are others, there are lots of other kind of segments of the population that are in a very similar boat. So it's much bigger than one group of people. I would argue that in Richmond Hill, in the official plan, with all of the things that we are offering or are about to offer, we have plenty of space to grow, to meet our housing targets, to create that kind of suite of affordable options. And affordable means different things to different people, right? So we have that. And we have that with still respecting areas that are off limits for housing, and still respecting areas that are not designated to do the kinds of high density that might be proposed. Every developer is building housing, and they're building it at a profit or they're not building it. I mean, it's a business, and I get that. And you know, the thing is, it's always a fine balance between giving the permissions that will spur development from the private landowners, the builders, the developers, and protecting the community and putting density and putting more people in places that make sense. And there's a number of practical things that I would define as making sense. One is you can't put a ton of people in a place that they're going to be dependent forevermore, or at least in the very long-term future, on cars and cars only. And that's why we are lucky in Richmond Hill that we have this kind of spine. I mean, it is Main Street, Canada, you know, going right up the middle of our town, city now. And we can move lots and lots of people from, just with transit. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody living in Richmond Hill is going to get rid of their car tomorrow. That's ludicrous, because the transit system is developing, and it's developing over time. So there is also a balance in how we grow and what we evolve into. And I'm not sure that in a place like Richmond Hill there will ever be a time where people will not use cars. But I have to say, we were in Germany on a trade mission recently, and we didn't even need taxis or Ubers. I mean, it was just, and we were in a couple of different cities, and it was just simple. Right, everywhere that you can go, and their transit system looked like a spider web, whereas our transit system in Toronto, I mean,
it's a spine.
It is, and it has been a spine for the entire time that I've been alive. Now, and I mean, again, like, we're working on that in York Region Transit, and some of the great initiatives that are happening. We are growing that transit system over time, and that's a good thing. But it's all together. Like, we can't be allowing development at a height and density that doesn't make sense, because if we do, we might build more housing that's affordable for the people that need that, and that's good, but we'll pay for the inefficiency that particular overdevelopment causes forevermore. And that's not doing any future generations any favors either. So the thing is, in this job, nothing, as I said, is black, nothing is white. Everything is kind of somewhere in between. It's gray, and that's why I think organizations like yours are good, because you're helping to make a more rounded conversation about what's appropriate level of development in different areas, and I think that's a good thing.
Any other question on transportation?
More zoning kind of thing. Go ahead.
Okay. So, I am really excited to hear about the plans to densify Richmond Hill. I think it's very needed. It's long overdue. I'd like to know, beyond public transit, what the plan is for making the city less car dependent, more bicycle friendly, more walkable, more family friendly. I have young children. I love to take them out. We all go out on our bikes.
Yep.
And every time we leave the house, I live near Bathurst and Major Mackenzie. Even in our own neighborhood, I have to micromanage our route to make sure that we're not on a road that's a little too fast,
right,
or cars are a little too crazy. So what are the plans for creating protected bike infrastructure? And are there any plans, for instance, along the Young Corridor, of course, the double-barreled question, to change the character of that street to make it not a parking lot desert, for instance? Okay,
there's a couple of questions. Make sure I answer all of them. Okay. No. I just want to get sidetracked and not answer one of your questions. First of all, I just wanted to say, our late Mayor Barrow, used to say, there was a few different things he used to say that I always kind of remember, and one of them was the challenge in Richmond Hill, and the thing that we're challenged to be up, we're up for the challenge, is we're building a city inside of a town. And that's true. And what I think the whole what I think about that every day is that there are areas in the city that are going to be quite dense and quite city-like. And then there's still going to be areas in the city that are what we're known for in Richmond Hill, which is very suburban, very, stereotypical suburban type neighborhoods. And, people value that too. And we need to be creating space for everybody. So the bike lanes and others. So we call that active transportation. So we have an entire transportation master plan that has sections in that plan about active transportation. There are many, many, many things, and I'm not a traffic engineer, so I'm not going to get all the details right, I'm sure, but I'm completely in favor of giving people choices. If you want to ride your bike, you should be able to ride your bike safely. If you want to walk, you should be able to walk safely. If you want to, take public transit, you should be able to take public transit. And by giving people more choices, we start to evolve into, I have a little bit of time today. I'm going to go get my groceries. I was going to drive, but no, I'm going to walk. Right, and if those options exist for people in a way that makes them feel comfortable and safe, they'll do it. Right, it is good for you. I mean, there's no question. And even though we have winter, there is still and that is a challenge, right? I mean, not many people are going to be riding their bike in the middle of January when we've just had 2 feet of snow.
He does.
Well, good for you.
So I want to focus on that a little bit. Does that include more protected bike infrastructure? Because I live in a suburban development. We love to ride our bikes. We use our car when we have to. If I'm going out with my kids, a lot of places, if we're going in certain parts of the city, we have to default to the car because the bike infrastructure isn't protected.
Right.
It's a painted line or something.
Bollards, why we can't?
Yeah.
So that is a good question, and I mean I think that's there are certainly opportunities for us to do that and do it quickly, do it at a fairly low cost, and do it well. There are other areas, though, that remember we're retrofitting what used to be with what is now. So there may be places where, protected bike lanes may not be an option, but, bike lanes themselves may be. Like, I mean, I was, a number of years ago when we started talking about the bus rapid transit way on Highway 7 and Yonge Street, I didn't really quite understand why we were bothering with bike lanes. And this was a number of years ago. I get it now. And I'm really glad that our transportation engineering staff had the foresight to reserve that space for those. Now, will those evolve into something over time? Perhaps. But for now, we have that spine in place. We are looking at trail connections because there's a lot of places where you can even be off the road.
There are 5 near me and they're not connected.
Correct.
Right? Yeah.
And so the way that we often, not always, but the way that we often get those missing pieces is through things like development applications or through, if it's like in a ravine or something, which already belongs to either us or the Toronto Region Conservation Authority, we'll do that through a capital project. And every year we advance, a couple more of those connections. And even in the time that I've been on council, I can now ride my bike further and further and further from my home without very much, if any, opportunity to even be on a street. But I think there's another component of this, and that is getting everybody to understand that we are in a place where there are other road users, And I know, my son lives downtown, and I normally don't go into the city of Toronto very often, but since he's lived there, I do. And, I am now, I think, because I've gone down there many, many, many times, I'm much more aware of other vehicles around me, like bicycles, like, e-bikes. Now, having said that, it is a bit of a sea change for drivers to be able, and it's not just on drivers, it's also on cyclists. E-bikes are a great thing, and micro mobility like scooters and all that kind of stuff are also things that we're exploring. But the problem is those vehicles go much, much faster than a regular bicycle. So as a driver, it does become much more difficult to keep track of all the bouncing balls, so to speak. So, there are things that we're working on that also, both infrastructure things, but also, driver behavior things that we need to be working on. And right now, another thing that we're working on is a traffic safety and operation plan. And that was a motion I put forward a number of years ago. And there are changes to different streets that include bike lanes. Some don't include bike lanes, but they include, speed bumps. They include different traffic calming devices. And I want to assure people that we only put those things in place where, by study from traffic engineers, we deem it necessary, because it isn't necessary on all streets. And I must say that some of those things are, often not met with a lot of, celebration.
They see as hostile infrastructure.
Yeah, exactly. But I think, and we certainly are here to listen to people when they, we usually do a pretty good public rollout when we're thinking about doing something like that to get the community's feedback, because the community does know their area really well. But at the same time, roads and so on are owned by us all. It's not owned by any individual people. So we need to make the network safe, and we are certainly working actively to do that. So, yeah.
I think there's a role on the city's part to play. That, for example, the rule is bike riders can't go on the sidewalks. Mm-hmm. But when we come on the road, there is no sign that clearly says, hey, one lane is yours. Mm-hmm. Yeah? If I can't take the whole lane, then I'm not safe. I can't. And when there is no... So it's not just that there are not rules, they are not being enforced, or they are not being publicized, so car drivers wouldn't think that this is mine, all is mine. Why are you on the road? You should get out of the... That's the perception, right?
Well, exactly, and that's why, roads don't belong just to cars. Primarily, let's be honest, it's used at the moment by mostly cars, and so I don't think that anybody in that drives a lot in suburban areas or rural areas, for that matter, would be faulted for not really, experiencing a whole lot with cycles, bicycles and micro-mobility. So there does need to be a change in our understanding on how we're doing that. And we are doing that. We are across Ontario moving in cities to a place where, we are seeing more and more and more people wanting to take advantage of active transportation. And, as I said before, from a health perspective and from an environmental perspective, that is absolutely a good thing. So we should be encouraging that kind of behavior. But at the same time, if you look what happened in Toronto with this, and it was a kerfuffle, right?
Yeah.
With the provincial government swooping in, and I'm not even going to comment on who was right or who was wrong there, but those types of kind of black and white,
cultural
responses to that issue isn't really helping to move the conversation forward, right? So I think that's something that we need to, we have the opportunity in Richmond Hill, because we're kind of at the beginning of our, active transportation journey. We need to be able to be in a place where we can have that conversation a little bit more logically and rationally.
Yeah.
So, hi Mayor West.
Hi Uni, how are you?
So, a Ward 3 kind of question. As you know, Ward 3, which is forward to Bayview, is strictly suburban. So none of that young corridor, we don't even have Highway 7. And we're talking about making the community more livable, more friendly. And when the whole place is printed out as residential without any mixed use or any local commercial zoning, aside from maybe the arterial community roads intersecting with the regional roads as specs, that's a little hard to speak of unless we have actual mixed use zoning along regional arterial like Spadina or something like that. So how are we, if we are going to see that kind of change in the suburban planning, provided that we're not going to be seeing condos being built there anytime soon? And as you know, with the traffic calming measures and the attempt to bring bike lanes into said wards, the NIMBYism, the resistance, the pushback, is particularly strong. So how do we get to humanly able to implement that?
Yeah. So, off the top of my head, I can't think of any opportunities within Ward 3 to go as far as what you're suggesting, perhaps. But there are commercial areas in Ward 3. I mean, they're mostly, restaurants and shops and all that kind of thing. the official plan lays out in great detail, and we have a new official plan, or we're actually, I shouldn't say we have it, we're almost at the point where all the pieces have been approved. But the official plan lays out the kind of the roadmap for how we will develop in the future as a city. And, admittedly, as I mentioned kind of earlier, there will be areas of the city that are going to be residential, and they're not going to be, there's going to be no high rises there. There's going to be not a lot of really big development there. And in my mind, that's okay. I mean, Richmond Hill does have a different character than, and like Toronto is different. Actually, Toronto has a lot of areas that are very suburban. But I mean, big cities are different than us as a city. So I'm comfortable with what the official plan lays out. I mean, there's always an opportunity for developers or landowners or anybody like that to come with an application to change that zoning. But if the zoning is laid out one way and somebody comes in for an application to change it to another way, it goes through a very thorough process, I mean, further to your suggestion. And if it's counter to what's suggested in that location, that process is going to take a little bit longer, because there's going to be things that are going to need to be looked at. They're going to be asking the applicant for justification, and it will be looked at by planning staff, and they will make a decision whether they recommend to council to either approve it or deny it. But I do think that there's areas of the city that are relatively suburban now and will likely continue to be within that structure for the foreseeable future. But, nothing stays the same forever. And there, as we talked about earlier, there are opportunities that are both done by the city by choice, but also dictated by the Planning Act by the province that we have to adhere to. And again, it's all a balance, right?
If not a big supermarket, what's wrong to have a small pop-and-ma cornerstone? Yeah.
We have seen one confectioner store from a restored historic building next to Bayview Secondary, and it changes the community's image quite a bit.
Yeah.
In fact, they become kind of beloved sometimes, even if
Yeah.
there's initial resistance.
No, absolutely. Actually, somewhere I forgot to answer a question about big parking lots. I think it was your question, right?
Yeah. They're all set
If I could, this is probably a good time to talk about that. So, the big parking lots you're talking about, for the most part in Richmond Hill, are probably at Highway 7 and Yonge, where the theater and Home Depot and all the big box stores are, and also
at around H Mart, TNT.
Right, 16th Avenue and Yonge and so on. So within our official plan, that's on the corridor area, but there are areas within the corridor that are also designated for a little bit higher growth, which are called key development areas. And there will be over time an evolution of those areas to more of a mixed use type of thing. There's currently an application. I can't remember whether we've approved it or not. I think it's now been approved for a little bit of redevelopment on the grounds of Hillcrest Mall. Now, Hillcrest is still going to be there, and they're, in speaking with Oxford, who owns that property, they're very much in the mall business. So they're going to continue to do that. Although I must say, losing the Bay has got to be a bit of a shock for them. But that areas like that will evolve, and a lot of it has to do, with the ability of businesses to be successful, right? Like the community may love certain types of stores, but if there isn't enough of that community to support that business, they're not going to be there. So it also, when we do our zoning and when we do our official plan, we're also trying to kind of keep in mind, what kinds of models of businesses are viable, because at the end of the day, having those businesses having good places and good spaces to be in our community is also very important. And if we don't provide the spaces for all the different types of products and services that we need, we aren't going to have them in our city, and that's problematic too. So we all try to make sure that we balance those opportunities in our plans.
I have a question. So this is related to the parking lots that we were just discussing.
Mm-hmm.
This is a problem that I've run into other cities when I go there and try to invest in them as a landlord, increasing the density by adding more units, that sort of thing. But almost always, parking becomes a problem because every time I add a unit, they say you need an extra 1.25 parking spaces. So because of that, I'm not able to invest in their community, and I don't want to see that happen to Richmond Hill either. So this type of change, from my understanding, would require a vote in council. So in terms of the political challenges that we would face in getting councillors to actually approve something like that, what would you say they are, and how can we overcome them?
So are you talking about like lowering parking standards in buildings? So
The
there's
minimums,
less
yeah,
parking.
minimum.
Eliminating them
Okay.
so business
So a
owners
lot
can
of that's
access.
happening. There are dictates, whether we like it or whether we don't like it, from the province that say that in areas that are served by transit, the parking standard is much lower than it was a number of years ago. Now, I have to say, I mean, I understand the logic of that, and just to expand, I think, on what you're saying. I'm not meaning to put words in your mouth because that's not hygienic. But doing when a builder builds a unit, if they have to provide a lot of parking, it raises the cost of the building significantly. And if it raises the cost of the building significantly, the reality is that's passed on to the consumer, which means that the housing is more expensive. Now, so by allowing builders the option of lowering the parking standards, and again, this is for the most part dictated by the province now in many of the areas in Richmond Hill, it does allow the builder to reduce their costs and allow their units to be sold at a lesser cost. That's a good thing, I guess. I know it's a good thing, but the problem with that is that when somebody goes into that unit, they can afford it, but then either right away or in time, they end up needing a second car because they find a new job in another place that they can't get to by transit. Now what, right? So parking is becoming very, very difficult to find in areas that are going to be doing that kind of thing. So we need to grapple with that too. And I mean, the logic of allowing lower parking standards where areas of transit are is that, people maybe will need less cars. The only difficulty and the concern that I have, and I'm not against that concept, but the concern I have is over time, we do have a situation where, until the transit system evolves to a point where there's really no need for a car, which may take a long time, right? What do we do in the meantime? And that's the concern, that I would have. So it's already happening in across Ontario. But I think it's a matter of finding, the subtleties to make that system functional. Yeah.
I appreciate the time. I have one last question.
Sure.
If you want to go.
I still have one more.
Okay, go on.
So when I was talking about mixed use, especially in previously very monolithic residential communities, I'm thinking about destination spots. As one who listens to Scott Galloway a lot and talking about the current birth crisis and so forth, we're talking about lack of third spaces and destination spots. So is there any plan with Richmond Hill regarding acquiring certain fields of where we will stand out in the entire region so that we become a destination instead?
Yep.
I've been talking about for a while now, for example, ETC Town Park being the only open spot to do archery in all of Canada, and currently that's under risk because of the Ontario Line construction project, and the place is constantly a swamp. So is there any chance that perhaps Richmond Hill could take that role over and become a second spot?
Yeah. So we're Richmond Hill has a number of assets right now that are really, really world class. I would say that the Dunlop Observatory is one of them. I mean, it's an unbelievably unique and different place. I frankly don't think enough people know about it, and that's probably. That's understandable because there isn't a lot in the way of amenities in that park at the moment, except for the really fantastic astronomy stuff, right? And I mean, the buildings are beautiful, but
There's some talk about gardens too.
right. So there is a master plan for the Dunlop Observatory where we will be bringing a lot more people to it. We've just completed, or almost substantially completed, the trail network. So now you get a lot of people in there just, walking their dog, having a good time. It's a really beautiful walk. At any time of the year. So that's certainly something that is evolving and getting better every day. The Mill Pond is another one where it's a magnificently beautiful park, and it's been very, very important over history in our city. And that park is set for a facelift, and we have a master plan for that as well. And that will really open up areas that currently are not really accessible, and I'm very excited to see that. And then the final thing that I'm particularly excited about and is really on my mind at the moment is I put in a motion a little while ago to open up the area around Major Mackenzie and Yonge to be, it's the Dave Barrow Square. But right now, it's basically a park bench and the central library, but there's all this vacant land around it. And we're going to be transforming that really soon into an urban square. And even that will evolve over time. I mean, when we finish that project, and I'm hoping that we're going to finish that within the next couple of years, it will be a place where people can come together and be in an urban park setting, have activities. We'll host events there. There'll be great reasons to come to that park. But even that will evolve over time, and it will in response to different needs that the community will have. And then finally, the other place that we have in Richmond Hill is Lake Wilcox. Lake Wilcox Park is magnificent. In fact, I guess the only thing I would argue maybe sometimes is it's too magnificent because it draws people from all over the place, right? And on a weekend, it's extremely busy. But I also think that speaks to the need that we need to be opening up places where people can be in a natural environment. Yeah. This is a long-term vision I have, but I think that we need to be opening up and parts of like Bond Lake.
Natural and urban. Any chance we could close off the Crosby and Major Macon Yonge to private traffic so people can walk and enjoy the...
I really don't think you're going to see that ever because Yonge Street is, I mean, as I said, it is literally the spine of Canada, right? And closing Yonge Street has very significant implications. And and the thing is, Yonge Street is intimately tied with our village core, right, where we are right now. And the village core, I have a lot of times people will come to me and say, oh, well, why isn't it like Unionville or why isn't it like Kleinburg? Well, Kleinburg and Unionville are not major streets like Yonge Street, right? Anymore. And well, yeah, they never were really, except maybe in the horse and buggy times, right? But that doesn't mean that this area can't be developed in a way. It won't be like Unionville, it won't be like Kleinburg, but it will be with the plans that we have in place here and the cooperation of the landlords and the people that own land in this area, it will evolve into a place that is a much more dynamic and revitalized location than it is at the moment. So in terms of destinations, there are lots of destinations in Richmond Hill now, and there will be more in the future. But I agree with you, Uni. I mean, I think, destinations not only attract people from other places, and that's great, but the thing that makes me happy about that whole idea is that it gives us as people that live in Richmond Hill a sense of community, a sense of place, a sense of pride in our community. And we have lots of those places now, and a lot of those destinations are starting to evolve in a way that they're starting to take
that they serve the region, if not the province.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, first and foremost, it needs to serve our community and our surrounding community, right? But when they're that good, they also start to attract people from other places, and and that maybe raises the whole pride in those in those locations and in our community as a whole, a little bit more as well.
So she mentioned archery. I feel confident saying this now because it's been destroyed, but maybe like 8 years ago, a long time ago, before the pandemic, there was this kind of illegal skate park in Richmond Hill. Do you know about it?
Illegal?
Like it was like a makeshift.
Oh, I don't know. Where was that?
There was on Levendale and Yonge, where there's that like abandoned lot.
Oh.
All the way at the end of it.
Oh, okay.
many people were involved in this, and
Okay.
they wrote magazine articles about us, and like there was actual concrete structures built there and stuff like that. And I also think that in Lake Wilcox, a lot of the people that are going there are going for skateboarding.
Yep.
So I think, yeah. So if she mentioned archery, I think skateboarding is something that like really brings a lot of people together.
Well, and that skate park that we have at Lake Wilcox is amazing, and it's always used, even in off seasons of the year, which is great. That's exactly what we want to see in a park. So we have a parks master plan as well, and we all of these master plans that we've done. I'm very proud to say in Richmond Hill, we've done a lot of consultation. And the voices that people have in those consultations tends to be reflected in the final documents. I've seen that again and again and again. And that's good, because that means that the plans that we have going forward are the plans that are going to reflect the needs of the community, today and in the future. So I don't have the Parks Master Plan in front of me, and I don't have it committed to memory, but I do know that the evolution and investments that we are going to be making over the years in our parks will do the kinds of things that you're talking about. Like if there's a need for different amenities, hopefully we would be able to respond to them through the Parks Master Plan. If a need for an amenity comes up unexpectedly, we can still add that into the plan. I mean, it's flexible enough. The balance again that we have to make sure we're taking care of as a municipal government is that a lot of these amenities are very expensive, and we need to make sure that the types of amenities that we're going to be creating in the future are going to be invested in a timely way. And we haven't talked about this, but we talk. There's a lot of talk lately about development charges. Right?
Yeah.
And development charges are a piece of the affordability puzzle, but I want to make it abundantly clear that I would be fine to see us lowering development charges to make housing more affordable, but the money has to come from somewhere. And if it doesn't come from development charges, what that means is, okay, let me just back up for a second. So development charges, for those that don't know, are calculated using a very specific shopping list of items that we are going to need to accommodate the growth that new building or that new unit or whatever represents. So it's new fire halls, widened infrastructure, whether it be roads or whether it be active transportation, new pipes and sewer mains,
electricity.
And so on and so on. And it's very specific, right? And the problem with lowering development charges just off the top and say, cut them 25%, that means that you get 25% less revenue to build the amenities that you're going to need when the growth happens. And that is very problematic, because a lot of the parks plans that we're talking about will happen as growth happens, but if we're not collecting development charges to pay for that growth, then we either have one of two choices. Either we don't do it, right? We just don't bother with it, which is unacceptable. And secondly, and this is probably just as unacceptable, if not more, we raise everybody's taxes so that they make up for the shortfall. So I've been advocating very hard with both the provincial and now with the federal government, and especially with the new federal government, to say, like, if that's part of the plan going forward, that you want to use development charges as a very targeted investment in making housing more affordable, I'm okay with that. But there needs to be a partnership with the provincial and federal government to say, if you're going to cut $1.5 million off of your DC collections, then the provincial government will, or the federal government will give the city the $1.5 million to make up for the difference. And I'm fine with that. I mean, I think that is a targeted and responsible way that could help with the affordable housing situation that we're in right now. But I want to be very clear that communities like Richmond Hill and other communities across Ontario cannot be without that revenue that's going to pay for the growth. And so
financing could be a topic of a whole session, and that proves that if we do incremental, we don't need to put that much weight on the development charges.
What do you mean?
Build in the places that already are built up. We don't need.
Well,
rather than going on the edges and building
Yeah,
everything
but,
from
but,
the zero.
but yes and no. I mean, and you're right. I mean, if you build a community that's all single detached homes and it's just huge urban sprawl, it is going to cost you
Much more.
to service that community. The infrastructure that you need, the pipes in the ground, the number of community centers,
The fire
halls,
department.
exactly, and that's one of the reasons why that type of development is problematic from a cost perspective, and that's the cost to the taxpayer. But the thing is, in Richmond Hill, like that's not us. Like we're not building sprawl type developments for the most part right now. We are building, you know, a very efficient type of built form, I think. And so, but if you lower development charges in any case, things like parks, like as more people move to a community, you're going to need more parks and you're going to need more capacity in those parks, and development charges pay for that. If you don't have the development charges, regardless of what your community looks like, you will not have the ability to pay for all those types of amenities. So it's very important, and you know, DCs are the tool that the province has given us for I don't know a few decades now. That you know, province has given us the tool that this is how we pay for growth. If the rules are changing now and they don't want to give us that ability to pay for growth in that way, we're going to need another way to pay for it, right? Because if not, what ends up happening is it's more pressure on the property tax base, and as we talked about earlier, that is a very regressive form of taxation.
It's a very interesting topic. I don't want to take more. Nathan had a question. I want him to also.
How are you?
Hey, yeah, I'm Nathan. Pretty new to this whole group and everything in general, but I've been really trying to go more into like this whole topic of like cultural communities, like active transportation and everything. And it's mostly been because I grew up in Ward 6 ever since I was like, 1.5. Went to the elementary school right next door. I live pretty near Chris, so we both see how like the community has changed and everything. I remember when like on Bantry, I remember when I have pictures of like when the house I live in now, it was first being built. I remember the park, the elementary school park I used to play in, it was nothing, it was just dirt. I would see them build it from the ground up. The elementary school was brand new and everything. But one key thing that always stuck out to me is because of the way a kind of more suburban city is laid out, there's always that unspoken rule as children where it's like, don't ever cross these streets and those streets. And more for me, because when I was younger, it turns out I have a tiny little disability. My eyes don't really sit well, they kind of shake around a bit, and it's a bit harder for me to see. It was much worse when I was younger, and this thing does improve, but essentially I would exist in the community, and I would like play, I would go in the parks and everything, but at first it was Bantry. I had to be careful when going across Bantry because I was concerned about what if I missed something, a car's going across, right? So I would have supervision to do that, and then that was okay. And then afterwards, it was like, okay, so now what about Young? I went to the high school that's actually across from Young, and I remember from the very beginning, like grade 9 or something, I actually had special help to be taught how to do things like navigate streets and everything, because for people who are visually impaired, it's not an intuitive thing for us. We need some help to go over the hump, and then it's like, oh, okay, you can recognize the patterns of traffic and everything. But I never really thought about it back then. I remember going to things like the theaters, going to the supermarkets and everything. The key thing is I never went there. My parents put me in a car and we just drove there all the time. Even if it was 5 minutes away, even if it was 2 minutes away, it's always been, because Nathan's scared of crossing the road. And
Right.
that kind of thing. Now that I've grown older, I am very fortunate where my disability, this can be compensated by parts of the brain. My brain actually helps me improve my vision, stabilize my vision. I'm at the point where now I've been able to ride a bike pretty easily for a while, and actually my optometrist, like they say I could probably like drive 90% of the time, except for like inclement weather, rain, snow, that kind of thing. And who knows, right? Drivers can be unexpected. It's always that 0.1% of the time where someone does something stupid, right? Cuts across you, and it's like, okay, that's when you have to be careful, right? And that's what I'm just noticing is now that I'm more independent, I'm trying to go places by myself, right? I'm socializing with friends. I have extracurriculars at university, for example, and then I'm like, okay, how do I get there? Well, we have a great spine, as you mentioned. Transportation spine is great. Richmond Hill Center is a great linking point to link together. So I can go from Richmond Center, I can take a Go bus, a Viva bus, whatever, I can go anywhere I want on the spine. But in my kind of more suburban style community, and then Ward 6 isn't even that, it's quite dense already compared to some of the other wards, but there's that last mile gap where like I have to go from my house and I'm like, okay, I need to take a bus like at 86, I'm like, when is it gonna come? Oh, I missed it. The next one's in 55 minutes.
Right.
I'm going to go there
Right.
to like a 2-hour extracurricular meeting. I'm going to go there 1.5 hours late and just leave.
Yeah. Well, what you're describing is something that's very important to us, and we take this very seriously. And that's making sure that everybody's included, right? And building, and it's hard because we need to build our soft community and our hard part of our community so that everybody has an opportunity to be included and to do all the things that they want to do, and to live their best life, right? And diversity, equity, inclusion. I know in the United States right now is under a little bit of siege, but in Canada in general, I think we've always been very good at understanding that we have a lot of gifts from a lot of different people with different abilities, but also from different parts of the world. And I mean, growing up in this community when it was very monoculture, a number of years ago when I was a little kid, and seeing it now with all the different people that live here, the different things that they bring from different parts of the world, frankly, the different food, which is great, all that other stuff. That's those are gifts that we have to leverage, and we're a stronger community for it. We have, we spend a lot of time with, we have an accessibility advisory committee, and any input that can be given from yourself and some of the things that you just talked about, those are things that we want to hear that. And we have people on that accessibility advisory committee that have a number of different disabilities, and we are trying to make sure that we're retrofitting where the infrastructure is already in place and creating new infrastructure that has those types of issues baked into it already. So I would hope that over the next number of years, you're going to see more and more and more an incremental improvement on all of the things that are needed, with the challenges that you have.
Exactly. I think I wanted to go onto the point of active transportation and everything. At least for me, I know every disability is different, right? Which is why I'm like, obviously we can't just eliminate cars, because yes, there are people who need cars. I have a neighbor who has a son who is completely paralyzed.
Yep.
They are completely car dependent. They have a handicapped car with a special ramp and everything. Right. So when I think about, hey, let's transform all of Bantry into like bike lanes and stuff, I'm like, hey, but my neighbor, the guy who lives next to me, they also need some kind of parking space.
Share equitably.
It is important to have that kind of
and again, it speaks to the same thing we were talking about, right? Like this is why, again, I find this group and this conversation really helpful, because there's nothing that we're going to ever do in a community that is one-sided or the other-sided. Everything is in between, and it's all, everything that I do as the mayor and we do as a council is to try to balance the needs of the community, and it isn't a science. I mean, it is absolutely going to take input from the community, and it's going to take a conversation that we all need to have, because maybe we think this and we think about it in this way, but there are needs over here that we're not really thinking about. Well, we need to have that conversation, to have the kind of conversations that we need to have to come to the right answer, whatever the right answer ends up being.
Exactly. I just think that what's great about this group is I think my kind of issue, right, accessibility and everything, inclusion, I think from taking the points from this group into account, it brings these kind of points from more of not just an accessibility or DEI kind of thing, it brings it into something that can benefit everyone. It's
Agreed.
not just something that, because some people advocate it and like DEI, we need this for DEI, it should be something that everyone can benefit.
Yep.
And also the key thing about disabilities, or the notion of disability, is that honestly, like, the difference between someone who we consider like disabled and normal functioning people is that the difference is one accident away.
Yes.
So why should one accident completely ruin your life?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I saw a statistic the other day that, and this speaks back to what we were talking about with the traffic safety and operation plan that we have. There's a graph that I've seen a couple of times, actually, that I was reminded of when I saw this the other day, that if you get into a car accident with a car going at 40 kilometers an hour, there's a pretty decent chance that you'll survive it, right? I mean, it will be bad. It's not a good thing, but okay. But if you get in that car accident with somebody that's going 60 to 80 kilometers an hour, the chances of survivability are very, very low. And that's, ultimately that's why we need, we have and we need to adhere to speed limits as much as possible. Because, at any given moment, there isn't a disaster in the making, but when the situation happens, like around school zones, right, where you have a lot of kids there, it increases the chance that somebody's going to do something that probably isn't a wise choice from a pedestrian's point of view, but the pedestrian is always the one that's going to lose, right, or the person riding a bike or something. So there needs to be, we really do need to make sure that we're operating in a way that's as safe as possible in our communities, and that is of paramount importance, to be living in a community that's safe for all of us, at the same time. So.
Mayor West, thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
your time, very generous, and we hope to see you again. This is very interesting,
Yep.
all topics, finance, housing, and transit, road safety, so
Well, you've touched on almost everything that keeps me up at night. So thank you
Good.
very much. I appreciate it.
thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you. All right. No, thanks everybody. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, thank you.
That was, as I said, I think there is.